Okay, the next lasting legacy we'll discuss is cuneiform. Cuneiform is the name of wedge-shaped characters, usually pressed into clay with a stick. It was one of the first forms of writing on Earth, and it was developed by the Sumerians, which is another culture in Mesopotamia. It was developed around the year 3300 BCE, but as you can see in our chart that we'll look at in just a moment, it was used for a very long time, but it began around 3500 to 3300 BCE, somewhere around that time period. In cuneiform, symbols could represent objects and ideas, similar to hieroglyphics. Cuneiform was the prevailing, or in other words, main form of writing in the Middle East for thousands of years. Many early laws, property records, and plans for architecture were written using cuneiform. Now, with our two pictures here, we see an example of some preserved cuneiform in this image here. So real, this is a picture of some real cuneiform. And then over here, we have a chart that shows cuneiform in its beginning form for a couple words, such as the sun in the top row, or God and heaven in the second row. And then as cuneiform evolved or changed, we see new signs. And now if you're looking at this chart here, it's important to keep in mind not necessarily that this image in 3500 so much looks exactly like this image, but just to see the steps showing how it changed over time. And the fact that cuneiform was used beginning about 3500 BCE all the way up until around 500 BCE or so is proven by these slight transformations. So cuneiform, type of writing developed by Sumerians in the Middle East and Mesopotamia around 3300 BCE. All right. Our next legacy here is another writing system. This one is the Phoenician alphabet. While cuneiform and hieroglyphics were used earlier, the Phoenician alphabet developed around 2000 BCE in Phoenicia, which is another civilization that developed in Mesopotamia. Instead of each symbol representing an entire idea or object, each symbol in the Phoenician alphabet represented a sound. All right, so that's a very big distinction here. Instead of each symbol representing a whole idea, or each picture representing an idea, each symbol represented instead a sound. These symbols could then be sounded out in order to make words. Maybe this sounds familiar. As the Phoenicians traded with other cultures, they used this writing system to keep records of sales and purchases. Since many sounds are common amongst the languages of the world, when other cultures saw it in use, they decided to adapt it to their own language. And the reason I said it might sound familiar is because today's modern alphabet is rooted in the Phoenician alphabet. So when we learn to write in the United States, for example, you probably learn, if you learn a new word, you don't know how to spell it, your teacher may have told you to sound it out. And if you have the word animal, for example, you make the sounds and you say ah for the beginning of the word, and you know that the corresponding letter is A. And then the next sound, n, comes from in, so then you put it together. And over using those steps, you can eventually spell out animal. That whole idea, that idea of writing using symbols that represent sounds, began with the Phoenicians. Thank you, Phoenicians. All right. Moving on to our next one. The next legacy is the wheel and plow. The wheel is one of the most important inventions in human history. The wheel's invention dates back to approximately 3500 BC in Mesopotamia. Again, Mesopotamians developing all kinds of ancient legacies for us. It allowed for quicker transport of grains, building materials, and other important items. Now, to go along with the wheel was the plow. A plow is a machine used for busting and tilling and turning dirt in order that seeds can be successfully planted in the dirt for farming. When combined together, the wheel and plow allowed ancient Mesopotamians to grow more crops. Animals could more easily pull heavy plows on wheels. This allowed dirt to be turned more easily, and farmers could plant seeds more quickly. Next, we have irrigation systems. And yes, you guessed correctly, the Mesopotamians are responsible for the first versions of these. Now, first, what is irrigation? Irrigation is the process of supplying water to land or crops by man-made or artificial means, meaning humans intentionally and purposefully change the surface of the earth or the landscape in order to transport water. All right, so man-made means is how we get the water from the source, maybe a lake or river or ocean, to our farmland. All right, mankind has to do this themselves. That's an irrigation system. Without irrigation systems, humans must haul water from a nearby river in buckets or hope the river floods. But not too much, because then you're dead. Mesopotamian civilizations had very intricate and thoroughly planned systems of irrigation that used trenches, basins, and canals to transport water from nearby rivers into fields for farming. Basins and canals were built so that the land would slope from the river downward towards a farm, and gravity would take care of bringing the water to the farm, and trenches served as holding areas for the farmers. So the whole idea is that mankind reshapes the land, uses basins, trenches, and canals in order to transport water from source to farm. Next, we'll take a look at Hammurabi and his code. Now, Hammurabi was a Babylonian, and that is again another Mesopotamian culture. The Babylonians were Mesopotamians. Hammurabi lived around 1792 to 1750 BCE. He established and was the ruler of the Babylonian Empire that conquered neighboring city-states in Mesopotamia. He's best known for his code of laws, which were adapted from earlier codes of the Sumerians. Hammurabi's code, which was carved into a hard stone, accomplished two goals. It gave the same laws to all people in his empire, and it gave clear and distinct guidelines for types of crimes and how crimes and disputes should be settled. So, same laws for everybody, provided guidelines for how to settle disputes. Two goals it achieved. Notably, members of different social classes were treated differently with Hammurabi's code. For example, if a person poked out the eye of an equal member of society, the punishment famously was an eye for an eye. However, if a member of a higher class poked out the eye of a lower class member, the punishment was not as severe. So depending on what class you are in, your punishment could be different. The code is one of the oldest works of writing on earth, which has been deciphered and is understood today. Many later ancient law codes followed the model of Hammurabi's code. All right, so we'll take a look at our last couple legacies in the third and final video.